I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and if you frequently watch these videos, you're probably missing my bookcase backdrop. That's because I'm on the road, but I want to talk today about patriotism versus cosmopolitanism and how this profound philosophical and cultural divide is a defining issue of our time. Just consider the cosmopolitan impulse. We've seen instances of it recently. Bad Bunny celebrating America in the hemispheric sense at the Super Bowl in Spanish.
God bless America. Sea Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana.
We had AOC putting sneer quotes around Western culture.
Marco Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture.
And in the Olympics, we had the American-born and raised Eileen representing China. So that's all. It's a little bit apples and oranges, different in substance or at least tone from what we heard from Jack Hughes at the beginning of this video when he scored that amazing overtime gold-winning goal for the United States. So what is patriotism and what is cosmopolitanism? Patriotism, which we heard a version of it from Jack Hughes, is basically love of your own, love of your fatherland, love of your own country. Cosmopolitanism, in contrast, considers that retrograde, backwards to narrow-minded, and tries to take what it considers a much broader, more sophisticated view of the world. So what I want to do in this video is three things. One, set out where cosmopolitanism came from philosophically, historically. Two, set out briefly why it's the wrong way to look at things, in my view. And three, talk a little bit about how patriotism versus cosmopolitanism is behind so many of the cultural and political issues dividing our society right now. So let's start with the roots of cosmopolitanism and roll it all the way back to the Greeks. The word cosmopolitan has its roots in the Greek word cosmopolites, or citizen of the cosmos or world. Now, Diogenes was a 4th century BC Cynic philosopher. He lived in Athens after exile from his native city, and he rejected all convention in favor of life of virtue, making a barrel into his home in the Athenian marketplace. He was the first recorded person to utter this cosmopolitan cliche. We hear a lot, I'm a citizen of the world. Now, this meant nothing to the Greeks. It was totally senseless because you only got citizenship through your polis. Then the Stoics picked up the cosmopolitan ball. The Roman philosopher Seneca said we exist in a local community by a, quote, accident of birth, but the world beyond is, quote, truly great and truly common. We should, quote, measure the boundaries of our nation by the sun. Then, fast forward more than 1,000 years, we get the Enlightenment. We get the French writer Montbron. I'm not going to try to say his whole name because I'm not cosmopolitan enough to be good at French pronunciation. But in 1753, he writes La Cosmopolite and said, quote, all the countries are the same to me, and boasted that he changed, quote, my places of residence according to my whim. We get the idea of the Weltbürger, a citizen of the world. We get Immanuel Kant. The great German philosopher posited a, quote, cosmopolitan right, unquote, to participate in the free exchange of ideas in the global community and urge the adoption of a League of Nations as a means of achieving, quote, perpetual peace. Okay? Good luck with that. Then we get the Prussian nobleman Anacharsis Cloots. He took this tendency very far. He wanted to eliminate nations and establish a, quote, republic of united individuals, end quote. He was a great enthusiast for the French Revolution, which he believed advanced the ball of this cause. He took a delegation of foreigners to the French Constituent National Assembly to express their enthusiasm for the revolution. Ultimately doesn't end well for him. He is executed by French revolutionaries who believe that he is, yes, allegedly part of a foreign plot. Oh, the bitter irony. In the more contemporary era, we get great literary voices like Virginia Woolf rejecting, quote, pride of nationality. We get Leo Tolstoy, who in my view wrote the greatest novel ever, and War and Peace, who's a Christian anarchist who thought, quote, it obvious that patriotism as a sentiment is bad and harmful as a doctrine. It is stupid. Now that's some on the background of cosmopolitanism. Now what's wrong with it? I'm not saying that anyone who holds these ideas or attitudes, by the way, is a bad person necessarily. Far be it from me to cast aspersions on, say, Immanuel Kant. But I think cosmopolitanism, justly in my view, has always been open to the charge that in the name of broad-mindedness, it cultivates a contempt for what's near, immediate, intangible. The British writer Paul Gilroy put it very well. He said cosmopolitanism involves, quote, the principled and methodical cultivation of a degree of estrangement from one's own culture and history. Sounds familiar, huh? The French philosopher Rousseau made a similar point. He commented that cosmopolitans, quote, boast that they love everyone to have the right to love no one. Charles Dickens lampooned this tendency with the famous character Mrs. Jellyby in the novel Bleak House. She was so consumed with a humanitarian project in Africa, she neglected everything around her, including her own children. Her eyes, Dickens wrote, quote, had a curious habit of seeming to look a long way off, as if they could see nothing nearer than Africa. So let's get to the third part of our discussion. How does this affect things today? Well, I think a big change is that cosmopolitanism used to overwhelmingly be an attitude of the outsiders in society, the philosophers, the critics of society, Diogenes living in his barrel in Athens seeking to outrage everyone. What's different now is that cosmopolitanism is very current in the elite in American society, in government, in the arts, in academia, in entertainment, even in the business world, and certainly is a dominant tendency in more or less extreme forms on the left. We see this in opinion surveys all the time. Republicans are more patriotic than Democrats. And the difference between patriotic attitudes and cosmopolitan attitudes drives so many issues in our debate at the moment. We see it in the fight over borders and immigration policy. The left insists borders don't really exist or shouldn't have meaning, or at least can be minimized, while the right insists they are substantial and important. We see it in the fight over the legitimacy of the nation itself, over its history and its founding myths. I use the word myths, by the way, in its largest and most profound sense, not in a pejorative one, but the left believes the country is defined by slavery, its mistreatment of Native Americans, colonialism, imperialism. It's basically a big lie. The right, in contrast, believes the revolution and our founding were some of the most marvelous and consequential events in world history. We see it in different attitudes towards our common English language. The left considers it somewhat dispensable. The right considers it absolutely essential. We see it more fundamentally in attitudes towards Western civilization. Do we consider it, as Marco Rubio said, the best civilization in the history of the world, or do we render Western culture in air quotes and sneer quotes the way AOC did? And it undergirds to a large extent the fight over Donald Trump himself, as critics consider him, among other things, a bumptious nationalist who puts a narrow-minded version of the national interest above everything else. Now, you can have legitimate arguments about whether any Trump policy actually advances the national interest, but they object to his focus on it in and of itself. Now, I happen to think that patriotic or national impulse is the correct one on all these issues. A couple big problems with cosmopolitanism. One, it is a lie. No one is a citizen of the world. We are all citizens of specific countries that have formed us in all sorts of ways and created all sorts of attachments, whether we want to admit it or not. Just hypothetically, if you're kidnapped by pirates, it's not the world that cares about you. It is your country that cares about you more than anyone else, and hopefully comes and tries to save you because you are one of its own, and that is profoundly meaningful in all sorts of ways. And then cosmopolitanism will, if taken to its logical endpoint, dissolve the bonds of this country. It will erode the cultural foundations we have in common. It will destroy our national self-confidence by undermining our history and teaching lies about our own country. And it will put corrupt multinational institutions and airy abstractions like international opinion over our concrete national interests. So to go back to the Olympics and put it in an Olympic context, in a nutshell, we have a choice whether we are going to be a country that thinks and acts like Jack Hughes, with his teeth knocked out and his mouth still bloody, and the first words he says after he scores that goal is, "I love America," and it's such a joy and honor to represent this country? Or are we going to go with another tendency, which is the so-called citizen of the world, Eileen Gu? For my part, I am firmly and unalterably with the tendency represented by the great Jack Hughes. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.